Welcome to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I am Lisa Collins, a member of City Club's Forum Committee. For more than a century, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people work together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live and explore. We're gathered today at the Sentinel Hotel and are joined by thousands of Oregonians via X-Ray FM's radio stations, KGW's website, Facebook feed, and news app, and Open Signal's community media television stations. In addition to City Club's valued media partners, our volunteers and staff enable us to continue to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Please join me in showing our appreciation to everyone who has made this event possible. Today we will hear from candidates seeking to represent people in Portland on City Council. Danny Ledesma will moderate our debate and will introduce the candidates. Ms. Ledesma is the interim executive director of Coalitions of Communities of Color. She joined the organization after 15 years in the public sector, working towards equity for underserved communities, including as Housing and Human Services Policy Advisor to Governor Kate Brown and Education Policy Advisor to Governor John Kitzhaber. Prior to these appointments, Ms. Ledesma was the Director of Equity, Policy, and Communications for the Portland Housing Bureau and was the Policy Director for Portland Commissioner Nick Fish. Please join me in welcoming Danny Ledesma and our candidates.
Thank you, Lisa. Today I'm joined by 5 of the candidates for Portland City Commission Position 3. Alphabetically, they are Stuart Emmons, Joanne Hardesty, Loretta Smith, Andrea Valderrama, and Felicia Williams. So to start, each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves before we dive into our very tough questions for the day. Each question has a time limit, which is displayed on this very large clock right up here. When a candidate has 15 seconds left and when their time is up, our timekeeper will hold up cards for the audience. Great timekeeper. Our panelists and the audience should know that if one candidate goes past the allotted time, their microphone will be effectively turned off, and the discussion will move on. In Oregon, we're known for our civic engagement and aspirations around civil dialogue. And today, I'm confident that we will be no different. I trust our candidates to focus on really advancing their vision for the city and to refrain from attacking one another. I'd also ask our live audience to please refrain from clapping or cheering so that we can hear all of the candidates without distractions or interruptions, and so that we can get through as many of these questions as possible. Our aim is to give the audience the maximum opportunity to get to know these candidates, so we want to try to get through all these questions. So welcome to our candidates. Let's get started. The speaking order will be random throughout the entire time, so let's go ahead and start with Felicia.
All right, thanks for coming out today. My name is Felicia Williams, and I want to tell you a bit about myself. I grew up in a large family. I have 9 brothers and 5 sisters, so I am number 10 out of 15. I wanted to go to college, so I took the one opportunity available to me, and I joined the Air Force. And I spent 5 years on active duty. And what I did in the Air Force was command and control. So anytime a plane crashed, a tornado hit, or there was an explosion, my job was to get it under control as quickly as possible. So managing chaos. After I got out of the military, I moved to Oregon. There are 3 things that I really liked about Oregon: great women's soccer, excellent music, fantastic beer. So I went to college at the University of Portland and graduate school at Portland State University. I taught history at both UP and PSU, and now I work for a biotech company doing audits and compliance. I'm running for Portland City Council. I've served my country. Now I want to serve my city.
Loretta?
Thank you, Danny. Hello, my name is Loretta Smith, and I'm running for Portland City Council, Position 3. As a single mother of a young Black man and someone who's lived in this community for over 30 years, serving the public and as an aide to Senator Ron Wyden for 20 years, and as a county commissioner for the past 8, I have experienced being marginalized and silenced firsthand. I know how important it is that we have someone on City Council That's a voice for the voiceless, a voice for speaking up, for seniors, for young people, and a voice for speaking up for all of those of us who have been marginalized and silenced. I know what's important. It's important that we uphold the right and the basic dignity for everyone in this community to have a permanent, safe, and dry place to live.
Andrea?
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you everyone for coming here today and those of you listening online. My name is Andrea Valderrama, and I am running for Portland City Council because we have a new Portland facing us today. Our city is different, our community is different, and so we need new leadership to reflect those changes that come with a changing Portland. Leadership also needs to come together to focus on Portland's most pressing changes that come with a growing Portland. Things like housing and homelessness, transportation infrastructure, and jobs. And I'm addressing these issues as a mom, as a David Douglas School Board member in Outer East Portland, and as a senior policy advisor in City Hall.
Stuart?
I'm Stuart Emmons. I'm running for Portland City Council because our city needs a housing and planning expert to get us beyond this crisis. I'm an architect, planner, and innovator. For the last 20 years, I've been working with community groups on housing issues. There are solutions for people experiencing homelessness. There are solutions for affordable housing for working families. We need someone with a successful track record delivering housing, and I'm that candidate. I will bring to City Council decades of real-world private sector experience actually getting projects built and not just talking about them. Through neighborhood plans across the city, I have worked with local communities for years, finding common ground and making good things happen. And I've worked with the city bureaus for my whole career, and we know we can do things better.
Joanne?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. I am Joanne Hardesty, and I'm running for Portland City Council Position 3 because I know we can do better. We can live our values. We can get the outcomes we say we want. We can create a community that, regardless of your income, is a welcoming, supportive environment. I am running because I believe access, housing and houselessness, good green jobs, and police accountability will make our city better. And I believe that each and every one of us has part of the answer. My job is to build the coalitions that will help us tackle these critical issues that we are confronted with. We only have a couple of years to get it right, and with the right bold leadership that will speak truth where they find it, we will be able to be the Oregon, the Portland that we can be proud of.
Thank you. So to begin with questions, I'd like to ask each of you a different question. You'll have 90 seconds to respond, and I want to ask these questions to start to address some of the elephants in the room. So Stuart, let's begin with you. Stuart, no women of color, only 2 men of color have ever served on City Council. As a middle-aged, white, middle-class man who lives on the west side, where 4 of the 5 current members live, why do you think that we need more of your perspective on council? If you could please refrain and let the candidates answer.
We have 2 races coming up. We have an election in 2018. We have an election in 2020. All of the seats for City Council are going to come up and available. I support a woman of color coming on to our council as soon as possible. We have a housing crisis. We have 1,700 people living on our streets. We have 1,000 Portland Public School students who are homeless. I am a housing and planning expert, and I feel like we need a housing and planning expert on City Council immediately to address our housing crisis, and that's why I'm running.
All right, Loretta. Loretta, you've been outspoken about the institutional racism that you've encountered at Multnomah County, and we've heard many reports about struggles that you've had even in your own office. What would you do differently to eliminate institutional racism at the City of Portland? And how would you do this with council staff and the bureau staff that would report to you to do this?
Wow, that's a loaded question, but thank you, Ms. Danny, for asking that question. Starting with the first question, I have apologized to my staff in terms of if I have crossed the line or even if I have been inappropriate in some kind of way. I think it is so important that we help the most vulnerable with a lot of passion, and that's what I do that with. And I know that I do have strong, very strong requirements, and I know that I'm very conscious of institutional racism in standing up for the most vulnerable, and I'm the first person to stand up. If I did have a chance to do it again, I would make sure that people knew that if there were some uncomfortableness, inappropriateness, that they could have said it to me in real time. I've told my staff today that if there's anything that you think that I do or the Chief of Staff does that's inappropriate, come to us immediately, don't wait. And that's what I plan to do when I go to City Hall, to make sure that we don't have these issues, but there's some systemic issues dealing with race that have happened over many, many years. And I think that I will be the first one to make sure that we have an equity lens on every bureau that's under my watch. And I want to make sure that I have a good eye of making sure that equity and diversity is number one. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Joanne, in recent years, you have been very outspoken about several city issues and led by being a very fierce and provocative advocate. If you're elected, in order to move policy forward at the City Council, you're going to need 3 votes. And these are going to be people that you've often provoked. Can you describe how you intend to approach working collaboratively with your fellow council members in order to move your agenda forward in this new position from insider instead of as an outsider advocate?
What a great question. Thank you for that. I've had the privilege of working with each and every city council member. I have excellent relationships with them. You might be aware that I've never been handcuffed and forcibly removed from any city council meetings. And so the disagreements are really around policy. They're not around people, right? I believe that we have an excellent city council, but I also think that their lived experiences have been a bit limited. Because as a vet, as a former nonprofit manager, as a former legislator, as someone who lives in East Portland, my lived experiences are what they are. No one can challenge what I have lived every single day. And so the ability to bring that to the city council, the ability to have invited testimony be people with lived experience, right? Rather than certified smart people. I am looking forward to helping the rest of my city council mates really understand what the lived experiences are from people who have to work for a living, people who don't have sidewalks, who don't have good infrastructure, who government basically has forgotten. And so I'm really, really excited. Even Mayor Ted Wheeler invites me into meetings regularly. I battle with him in public, but always respectfully, always understanding decorum, and understanding that we have a job to do to protect all our people.
Thank you. Felicia, one of the biggest barriers to equitably distributing solutions to homelessness, like affordable housing, emergency shelters, and services, is neighborhood pushback and NIMBYism, which stands for Not in My Backyard. Many service providers and city staff, myself included, can tell horror stories of the vitriol that's spewed at neighborhood associations when we're discussing these important issues, often blaming the people who we're trying to serve the most. As a neighborhood association president, how have you positively pushed back on these negative views? And as a commissioner, how would you call out and push back on NIMBYism at the neighborhood associations?
It's kind of a fun question. There are 94 neighborhood associations in the city of Portland, and each one is independent. And they're run by volunteers. So obviously there's going to be a different set of people at each one. But it's a valid question. There's a lot of variation between them. My neighborhood association has 87% renters. We also have the highest density of public housing in the city. If you Old Town, Chinatown, and downtown. This is where the bulk of the 0 to 30% median family income public housing is. So for us, we look at it as a priority. We know who we're serving. My neighborhood lost 500 deeply affordable housing units to condo conversions. This impacted our neighborhood. We never got those back. So when inclusionary zoning was being proposed, the ban was being overturned at the state level, the Community Alliance of Tenants contacted us and asked us to come on board as a neighborhood partner. We discussed it. Our board of directors had public housing residents, developers, and renters on it. We realized that the only way that inclusionary zoning was going to work is if we didn't fight against height limits in downtown. So that was the trade-off that we made. We supported the overturning of the inclusionary zoning ban because we knew that IZ would be in our neighborhood. But we also understood that we couldn't fight height in Central City 2035. I think there's a lot of valid concerns about neighborhood associations, but as a whole, these are people who care about their community, and we shouldn't completely dismiss them.
Andrea, as the youngest candidate, many people will question your readiness for office. So can you give us examples of projects or policies or initiatives where you led from beginning to implementation that illustrate your sound judgment and maturity that you'll be needed to serve in this position?
One of the projects that I'm most proud of having worked on with TriMet was the increased frequency of service on 122nd, in addition to the safety improvements necessary so that folks would be able to get to their jobs or to school in a way that was safe and in a way that we knew was appropriate for them. This took many months of working with the community, working with PBOT, working with TriMet, working with other entities to not only find the resources, but then make sure that we were not impacting businesses negatively, engaging the community. And this is just one example of the work that I've put in over the past 6 years in City Hall. I've also had the pleasure of writing numerous policies, from the city's sanctuary city policy, drafting and redrafting others around housing, around transportation, and that's just the work that I've done in City Hall. As a David Douglas School Board member, I've been most proud of the work that I've done around increasing access for healthcare services in our school-based health center, making sure that all students and community members who the health center is open to have that access. And this is, again, demonstrative of my ability to work well with my colleagues to get unanimity. To me, it's not just about 3 votes, it's about making sure that the relationship is positive long-term.
Great, thank you. All right, now that the elephants are gone, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some other issues. For these sets of questions, we're going to give you 60 seconds to respond. I'm going to choose you at random to begin and to end, so pay attention as I call your name out. So the first one is, the City of Portland has expressed a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The city has the Office of Equity and Human Rights. There are equity plans. There are more and more staff who are dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yet, deep racial disparities remain, so much so that The Atlantic published an article in 2016 titled, "The Racist History of Portland, the Whitest City in America." What is one strategy, arguably the strategy you think is the most important and will have the most impact on closing racial disparities in our city? Felicia?
This is a great question. I think number one, if we have a structural problem, we have to change the structure. So what I'm strongly proposing, and what I think we all need to get behind, is changing the form of government. So right now, it's not representative. It's a system that favors people who are either wealthy or well-connected. This is going to require a charter change, but what we need is district representation across the city. We need to get rid of the bureau, the commissioner form of government, where we have commissioners actually in charge of bureaus, and make sure that it's a professionalized city. But we need to have district representation, because that's the only way, if you're going to change the structure to address structural racism, you've got to make sure it's representative.
Thank you. Stuart?
Schools. We have terrible disparities in our school district and all of our schools, and every kid ought to have an equal shot at a bright future, and we have work to do for that. So how can the city help? Well, yes, the city has sort of said we don't really do schools, we're going to stay away from that, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that we can help tremendously from City Council. One is housing. Every kid needs to come from safe, warm, and dry home that is stable. Second, afternoon programs. Out in Rockwood, I worked on a project where a lot of the kids came out of school and their parents would work till 8 p.m. I think the city can do a lot with that and have a lot and coordinate with existing programs. And the third is summer programs. We can do a lot more with that from City Hall. So schools are the foundation for working on our racial disparities.
Andrea?
I have had the pleasure of working with the Office of Equity and Human Rights and would love the opportunity to continue to work and lead that bureau and recognize that even if I don't, that the commitment to equity still must be there. And so for having conversations around housing, it's important to understand how and when people are being discriminated against if they are trying to get into housing. If we're talking about our Transportation Bureau, it's important to recognize that it is unsafe for kids to walk and wear. And so this conversation is an institutional one. It's one where it's requiring leadership to step up and ask those hard questions, regardless of what bureau it is. The other piece that I'll add is that we have a lot of work to do in the implementation of our racial equity plans, and I would really make sure that I'm not only pushing forward the plans in my own bureaus, but working with other commissioners directly to making sure that we're partnering on the right strategies to make this institutional change that I know is very much needed.
Joanne?
If we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And since Oregon was founded on a white supremacist model, we have to understand how public policies have continued that tradition. So for example, when 10,000 African American families were displaced from inner Northeast between 2000 and 2010, no one yelled housing emergency. Not even a peep. In fact, we were told that was progress, right? That was urban renewal. The city of Portland does a great job of developing a vision and a not so good job of actually holding people accountable for that vision. And so having a leader that understands the historic nature of broken promises, of disparity studies, of task force that have at the end of the day changed nothing, will be vital to move us towards a more racially just city and a racially just city council.
Loretta?
Thank you. That's a good question. You know, I think as a community of color, a member of the community of color, we need to demand that the media portray our people in a positive light. I'm not an angry black woman. I am an effective black woman, because when I heard from the Coalition of Communities of Color that their students were not graduating from high school at the same rate, and so I said, this is simple. All we have to do is make sure that we give more community-based organizations additional dollars so they can work with our children, because that's the ball game from K through 12. And I have directed $2.1 million for the last 3 years to Latino Network, NEA, SEI, ERCO, to make sure that our families who are vulnerable, that they have an opportunity to have their children graduate from high school, and they are graduating at a higher rate when they work with those organizations.
Great, thank you. For our broadcast audience, this is the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Danny Ledesma with the Coalition of Communities of Color, and today we've been hearing from the candidates running for Portland City Commission Position 3. I'd like to ask you all a next question about what it will be like if you're actually governing. So would you share with us which bureau do you know the least about, and what would you do if the mayor assigned that bureau to you? Andrea.
I would say that I could use a little refresher in our Bureau of Environmental Services and the partnership there with water. And I would be really excited to have these bureaus because certainly as we look at the future of Portland in our climate conversations and making sure that we're living up to providing a better community for our future generations, I would really be excited to learn about how to best make that possible in these bureaus. I'm grateful that I've had a really great working relationship with Commissioner Fish and would welcome the opportunity to get as much information from him and other community members who have been working on this bureau for a very long time.
Joanne?
I think it would be the Bureau of Developmental Services, as I've had 93 house parties and talked to business owners and developers and school districts all around the city of Portland. They have all consistently say they hate that bureau, that it absolutely is the most bureaucratic, it is the most, it sends you running in circles. And so that would be the bureau that I think I would need to sink my teeth into and find out why it takes a year longer and 500 permits more to do basic housing development when we're in the midst of a housing emergency. And so I would love to get in there and ask some hard questions.
Felicia?
The Bureau of Technology Services. How many of you guys were even familiar that this was a bureau? Yeah, so a couple. Okay, that's good. So apparently they're the ones responsible for, I guess, all of the computers being installed and then all of the networks, so the security for all of the entire system. And so I look at this and say, 21st century, we have problems with hacking in our systems. We look at what happened in Atlanta, Georgia with their 911 system. This is a pretty huge area. And honestly, I don't really know what all the Bureau of Technology Services does. So I think that would be the big one that I would need to learn more about.
Loretta?
I think transportation would probably be the least that I know about, but what I do know is that had I had the transportation department, I'd figure out how to process those permits a little bit faster. Because what I do know that we are a infrastructure government, and if that's our book of business, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of staff. The second piece is, on any infrastructure projects that we build, I'd put a PLA on every single project. I'd make sure that if we're widening sidewalks, that we go out east first, that we make sure that folks past 82nd have an opportunity to have the transportation dollars in their community. I know I live in the Wilkes neighborhood, and there's a huge problem with north to south transportation to try to figure out those opportunities. And the last thing that I would do, I would demand that TriMet, that they take those electric buses and put them out east of 82nd to where the most vulnerable communities are first to deal with the toxins that are in the air.
Stuart?
Well, I'm kind of the best of both worlds. I'm from the private sector, but I've worked with most of the bureaus for my entire career. And at least familiar, maybe water. Last week, I was at a pre-development meeting for one of a privately funded affordable housing project I've been working on. We had 5 bureaus represented at that meeting, and I swear people were must have been out in the corridor saying, how can we derail this project, and then let's go in and fire questions at this development team, the architectural team. Our bureaus are, there's a lot of political issues with bureaus. They are silos, and they need to coordinate better. And the whole system is not working right now. And my little example from last week was a great example of that. Bureaus need to work well together, especially Bureau of Development Services and whatever, to deliver housing more effectively.
The national political discourse is divided and hitting new lows. Our hope is that our local elected leaders will go high while so much of the rest of the country is going low. So please cite for us examples where you've reached across an ideological divide to build consensus with a former foe. And we're going to start with Felicia.
So this is actually kind of interesting because I draw my support from a pretty broad swath of Portlanders. I have an anarcho-syndicalist friend, and he has nothing in common with a developer friend of mine. It cuts across the spectrum. And so what I try to do is ask first and foremost, how do we find common ground? And yes, this gets back to the neighborhood associations. We have a tendency to be rather vitriolic towards each other. But the first step is always, how do you find common ground? And so that's what I try to do. What can we agree on? How can we move forward? And so that's what we did with the inclusionary zoning when we supported that. And that's what we try to do every time we have anybody come into our neighborhood. How can we agree? What can we find that we have in common with each other and work from there? Because the simple truth is we actually have to work together. We have shared problems. And if we don't work together, we're not ever going to solve them.
Joanne?
I love that question. As a former legislator, a flaming liberal legislator in a Republican-controlled legislative body, it was my job to find something in common with every legislative colleague. That worked very effectively in 98% of the cases. In addition to that, and so I was able to actually build those relationships to pass legislation so that good things could happen for Oregonians. But in addition to that, I think the NAACP, rebuilding the NAACP Portland branch, is a story of reaching out to people from all segments of our community and valuing what they could bring to the table. And telling them that whatever they bought would be okay, it would be enough, it would help us. And now I'm happy to say that the NAACP Portland branch is a thriving civil rights force in this community. And shout out to the current president, Edie Montagne, who's in the audience.
Stuart?
Much of my career has been doing community projects, livable neighborhoods, and projects like fire stations. And I worked with some pretty diverse groups, and we all worked together, I as a leader, to find common ground and make good things happen. As far as a foe, I wouldn't call Homer Williams a foe at all, but I was on the other side of the Terminal 1 project. I opposed the Terminal 1 project. And now I'm very excited about what Homer and Don Mazziotti and Oregon Harbor of Hope is doing on the Wapato project. I want to stop saying no to homeless solutions. Every time we put a shelter up or a housing project, the whole neighborhood comes around and community, no, let's not, there are all sorts of good reasons not to do it. We need to get to yes on every project we possibly can and all come together and get our 1,700 people who are unsheltered off our street as soon as possible.
Andrea?
I brought up my advocacy around increased contraceptive or increased healthcare services in our school-based health center, but one of the things that I'm most proud of in that work was that this was a vote that passed unanimously when previously in front of the board failed 3 other times. And so the work that I put into reaching across the table to other colleagues who were very clearly on the opposite end of values conversation, the work that I put into community, into research, absolutely made a difference here. And that is so critical, especially in this time when it's important to listen to your colleagues and to take into consideration the feedback that they have. This has been something that I've done for many years, is to be strategic about when and where policies and programs are coming forward. How can we best work together to be successful for the community that we serve?
Loretta?
Thank you. That's a great question. In my time at the county, I think I've passed over 71 amendments and budget amendments and resolutions. So that takes about 2 other people to say, yes, I agree with you. A lot of young people say to me, what degree do you have to be a commissioner? I say, all you have to do is know how to count to 3 in a 5-man commission. And I've been able to count to 3 over 71 times for a variety of issues working to help support seniors stay in their homes, identifying dollars for youth employment, for paid internships over the summer. And the one that I think that was very, it meant a lot to me when I went to Chair Kafori and asked her to co-sponsor the Sanctuary County Amendment. And she said yes, and we passed that amendment in 2016 because many of you let us know that immigrants and refugees in this community were afraid, and we needed to show the community that we had their back. That was really special to me.
The mayor wants to increase the Portland Police Force, and many communities distrust and do not support increasing funding for the Troubled Bureau. Do you agree with the mayor's spending proposals, or would you invest differently in the Bureau? Please include in your answer one thing that you would do to support the new police chief, Danielle Outlaw. Let's start with you, Felicia.
All right, I guess I get to start first again. Hot dog. So, yes, I do support increased police staffing. And the reason why I support it is because we have all sorts of incredible problems. So when you call 911 and you are put on hold, that's a problem. If you call 911 and you're put on hold and then you have to wait another 20 minutes for somebody to show up, that's an even bigger problem. And I see this every single day in my neighborhood. And I know that this is a problem across the city. I do think that more training is necessary. For example, the enhanced crisis intervention training, every single police officer should be doing that. As somebody who was in the military, shoot first, ask questions later, that's not appropriate. It should be the last resort. But yeah, I think this is one of those things where our entire community is reliant on having safe neighborhoods. So I absolutely support it.
Andrea?
For me, police reform is personal and it's professional, and it's absolutely very complex and filled with many contradictions. And so on the one hand, I've had many people in my family who have been racially profiled. I myself have been judged by the color of my skin by police officers. And so I understand why we are at a time when people are scared to call the police in an emergency situation. On the other hand, I do work at the city, and I know that our crime rates are increasing. We've heard about hate crime increasing. We've heard about other violent crimes increasing. And we know that officers are responding to that criminal activity in a way that they're overworked, they're overtired, and they're more likely to make decisions when implicit bias is affecting them. And so, I'm not the leader that thinks that there's a simple solution to this. There's not. But what I do know is that we need someone who's willing to mend relationships. Trust has been broken, so we have to make sure that leadership is thoughtful, is being patient with everyone involved.
Loretta?
Can you read the question again?
The mayor wants to increase the police force, and many communities do not support that, and they distrust the Bureau. Do you agree with his spending proposals, or would you invest differently in the Bureau? And please include one thing that you would do to support the new police chief, Danielle Outlaw.
I think that the community has every right to distrust what the mayor is suggesting, because first of all, we need to spend our first money for cultural diversity and sensitivity training for the current police officers. That's job number one. The second piece is we need to understand that we're a big city today, and our job at the city is infrastructure and public safety. We have more people in our community today than we had yesterday. Last year, we had 45,000 people move to the city of Portland. This year, we're going to have another 45,000, and our city has grown. And we do need additional public safety officers. I don't know how many, but I do know that that is something that we need to accept. But we should not accept mediocrity. We should not accept when we have people who have mental health issues that they're being shot, and we should not accept that men of color are being shot by our public safety officers. I know that that is an important thing. I have a son who is 27 years old. He's a black man, so I'm really concerned about that too.
Stuart?
Most of us saw the video of the shooting over in the Central East Side and were shocked by it, as I was. This question first came up right after that incident, and I said, heck no, the police don't need more police. Then I thought about it for another day, and I thought about the ride-alongs I've had with the police on the Outer East Side, and I thought about what Mayor Tom Potter taught me about policing. And also looking at the statistics with the number of people we have in our city compared to the number of people who are policing our city. So I support more police. However, it needs to be tied to a much better training regimen. Obviously, that shooting clearly showed that we needed to have much more mental health experts out on site. And also, we need to demilitarize our police force. Our police force ought to come from our community, and our police ought to look like the community that they're serving.
Joanne?
No, we do not need more police officers. In fact, we need to get police back to policing. Police jobs are to solve crime and prevent crime. Police will not solve our housing crisis. Police will not solve the lack of mental health services in our community. And we have to assess, especially since we got the auditor's report on how the 28 officers who are part of the gang enforcement unit operate. Now that we know 90% of the people that they stop are African American in a city with a 6% African American population, to me that is inexcusable. And the fact that no elected leader has even questioned how that could possibly be, I find appalling. I have been supporting Chief Outlaw since the day she showed up in October. I will continue to help her retrain, retool Portland police officers so that they actually are the professionals we know they can be. In addition to that, I think it's really vital that we have an audit from top to bottom of Portland Police Bureau so we know who does what and why.
For our broadcast audience, this is the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Danny Ledesma with a coalition of communities of color. And today we've been hearing from the candidates running for Portland City Commission, Position 3. Okay, I think we've got time for one more of these longer questions. So you all have been on this circuit for a little bit. You've gotten asked lots and lots of questions, some of them more than once, and you've done a good job of mostly answering all of my questions, addressing all the things. Thank you very much. This next question I want to ask you: now that you've gone through these forums, what's the one question that you have not been asked, and that we should be asking you, and how would you answer that? So what's the one question that you have not been asked? Why should we ask you that, and how would you answer it? Stuart?
I haven't been asked about my Portland home project. I'm the one who actually has a plan, the only candidate, the only person in City Hall who has a plan to address homelessness effectively. In 2 years, everybody on tents and tarps and human suffering off our streets. In 4 years, 75% of our homeless or people experiencing homelessness in housing, in safe, warm, and dry housing. That's the question that I would like to ask, and this book is on my website, stuartemmonsforportland.com.
Felicia?
You know, one of the questions that we were kind of prepped for, but never came up, was what are your values, and how do your values apply to the city? And, you know, I'm going to fall back on my military here. The core values of the Air Force were ones that I definitely relate to. Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all that we do. Those apply directly to serving our neighborhoods. It applies directly to serving our city. It applies to serving our country. And I think it's really important that everybody asks, what are your driving values? And I'm going to throw one more on there that I got from a supervisor that I had in the military. Always try to be fair. Every time, try to be fair. In every situation, try to be fair. And finally, Sergeant Veronica Ford, she told me, always try to leave each place better than you found it. That's why I'm running for city council, and those are my values. And I think a lot of people here share them.
Joanne?
That's a tough one. What have I not been asked that I should have been? Maybe it's how does the Navy inform your decision making when you're on the Portland City Council? Maybe it's where will you go to seek advice on information that you don't know? It is my belief that it is not the job of an elected leader to have all the answers, but they have to be smart enough to know where to go get the answers, and they have to be able to check data. I have been absolutely appalled many times sitting in an audience at City Council and listen to testimony, and I know that's not true, and I think, well, clearly they're going to ask questions about that. Clearly they are, right? And they don't. They just accept it as fact because guess what? Certified smart people said it was so they accepted it. So I think that's probably all I can get in the last 2 seconds.
Andrea?
I would love the opportunity to answer a question around our experience around workers' rights and labor organizing. The city of Portland is first and foremost an employer of anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 employees, depending on the season. And so it is so critical that we are building long-term, strong relationships with our unions. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to have been endorsed by AFSCME, and my organizing came in from the workers' rights movement as my family did labor organizing in Peru, and we have to think about not only the workers within our own office as commissioners, but also the workers that we oversee and are building a better working environment for, that's free from discrimination, that is safe, that provides services that are equitable. So those are things that very much matter in a commission form of government as a commissioner.
Loretta?
Thank you. I talk about youth employment a lot, and no one has ever asked me, why do you care about youth employment so much? And if they were to ask me that question, I would tell them, I was one of those youth. I came from Michigan. I was on free and reduced lunch. And my first job, my CETA job, do all of you know what a CETA job was? It's the OJTPA. If you know what that is, then you're as old as I am. But I had one of those jobs, and I input the grades at lunchtime for my English teacher. And that was many, many, many years ago. And I know how important that summer job was to me and to my family. I spent so much of my political capital making sure that low-income kids, underserved kids have an opportunity to have an opportunity. That's why I spend so much time on this summer jobs program, and the data shows that when kids who are in high school have summer jobs, they graduate at a higher rate and get their degree and go on to college. So that's why I care so much about those kids, because I was once one of those kids.
All right, time is flying when you're having fun. So we're going to transition over to a lightning round. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm looking for yes or no, nothing more. My buzzer sound may come out during this time, but we're doing this because we want to be able to get you all to answer as many questions as possible. But at the same time, I've known of you or known you all for many years, and I know that you want to be transparent on where you stand on the issue. So we're going to go ahead and do this, and we're going to do rapid fire, yes or no. You technically have 5 seconds to answer. Okay. Yes or no. I will buzz you if there's more than a yes or a no. All right, so let's start with some state initiatives. Number 1, do you support IP22? This is a ballot initiative to repeal Oregon's sanctuary status that separates local law enforcement from federal immigration enforcement. Felicia?
No.
Loretta?
Say that again.
Do you support IP22? That's the repeal of Oregon's sanctuary status.
No.
Andrea?
No.
Stuart?
No.
Joanne?
No.
Number 2, do you support the proposed ban on grocery taxes? This is another state initiative. Stuart?
Can you repeat the question?
Do you support the proposed ban on grocery taxes?
No.
Andrea?
No.
Loretta?
No.
Joanne?
No.
Felicia?
No.
Let's look at local. Do you support the mayor's proposed business license tax increase? Joanne?
Absolutely not. No.
On probation there. Hold on. Stuart?
No.
Andrea?
No.
Loretta?
No.
Felicia?
Maybe.
Okay. Number 4, do you support a change to the city's charter to change the commission form of government to include a city manager in charge of oversight of bureaus and a council focusing on policymaking? Andrea?
Yes.
Stuart?
Yes.
Loretta?
Yes.
Felicia?
No to managers.
Joanne?
Yes.
All right, City Council has directed PBOT, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, to study congestion pricing options, which basically sets up tolls and fees on the most heavily used roads as a deterrent to traffic. Do you support the concept of congestion pricing? Stuart?
Yes.
Joanne?
No.
Andrea?
Yes.
Felicia?
Yes.
Loretta?
No.
Number 5, do you support the Portland Clean Energy Fund, a surcharge on retailers to support weatherization, clean energy jobs, and jobs in underserved communities? Felicia?
No.
Loretta?
No, don't have enough information.
Andrea?
Yes.
Stuart?
Yes.
Joanne?
Definitely.
As a commissioner, you will be in charge, directly in charge of supervising Bureau staff. Do you have experience recruiting, hiring, managing, supervising people in the C-suite or executive leadership? Stuart?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Loretta?
Yes.
Felicia?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
All right. Number 8, will the Trailblazers win a national championship by the year 2020? Stuart?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Felicia?
Go Thorns.
Loretta?
Yes, if they get LeBron James.
Joanne?
Maybe.
All right, those are questions for our lightning round. We're going to go ahead and give our folks an opportunity to provide closing remarks. You each will have 1 minute to share with our audience, and I'm going to encourage you to share with our audience why they should vote for you after hearing everything that we've already heard. Maybe not repeat what you've already talked about. You're going to go ahead and let us know why should folks vote for you for Portland City Commission, and we're going to go ahead and start with Stuart.
Yesterday, I saw a mother and her daughter, young daughter, walking down downtown street. And the little girl was staring at this pile of tents and tarps that nearly blocked the sidewalk. What is this telling our next generation? We can do better. I believe homelessness is solvable, and we must solve it to have a bright future. People come up to me sometimes and say, do you ever talk about anything besides housing? And I say, rarely, because a safe, warm, and dry home is the foundation of a successful life, a successful city, and should be our top priority. 3 years ago, the mayor declared a housing emergency. And where are we today? We are in worse shape. I am the candidate who has the experience, knowledge, and passion to move us beyond our homelessness and affordable housing crisis.
Andrea, sorry.
We are a progressive city, but there's been a gap between good intentions and direct results. And when we don't have someone on city council who goes back home to a neighborhood where it is unsafe for kids to walk across the street, when decisions on housing are made with no one at the table who comes from a multi-generational immigrant working class household like mine, we are missing out on the opportunity to have Portland voices at the table and in City Hall. We need new leadership to weave the opportunities of the future with the healing of the broken promises of the past, and someone who has already demonstrated that they can get things done with their colleagues, work with the community, and advocate for those most directly impacted. My name is Andrea Valderrama, and I'm asking for your vote so that that future of Portland can start now.
Felicia.
So my name is Felicia Williams. I am running for Portland City Council. What we found is that the problems that afflict Portland cut across the city. Selwood to St. John's, Brentwood, Darlington to Bridle Mile. We have a lot of the same problems. It doesn't matter where you are in the city. We have a lot of people who are trying to divide us, east versus west, rich versus poor, black versus white. We have to actually work together. But here's the bottom line. There are 600,000 people that live in Portland. Only about 100,000 are going to vote in the primary. Your vote matters more in the primary than it does in the general election. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to my website, feliciaforportland.com, but I'm asking you, please vote by May 15th. The future of Portland actually does depend on it.
Loretta?
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone here for an excellent discussion, and I want to thank the City Club for sponsoring us today. I want to tell you why I'm so committed to helping our most vulnerable. Shortly after my son was born, I was a single parent with literally no place to live on my own. Jordan and I couch surfed at my grandparents' for a few months. I remember pulling up to a gas station asking the attendant to put 80 cents in the tank. The man said, "No way," and paid to fill the entire tank himself. That's the generous spirit of the city that I love about Portland. Portland must lead in helping out those who are falling behind. Portland must lead in reducing toxins and promoting environmental justice. And Portland must always welcome everyone, regardless of the threats and the taunts from the White House.
Joanne?
You should vote for me because I am a proven leader. I stepped up when the NAACP was in crisis. I've stepped up and served in the legislature. I stepped up and advocated for police to stop using excessive force against folks. The things that I just mentioned, nobody paid me. I wasn't the one that was in danger. When I stepped up to fight Measure 9 and Measure 13, wasn't because it impacted me personally. It's because I believe that we really are all in this together and that we have to value each and every person in our community and that every community member has value, regardless of your income, regardless of your position. And I have spent my career making sure that I've engaged with people at all levels. And so I can hang with the houseless person on the corner as well as the CEO that actually has to invest in our future. I ask for your vote.
So unfortunately, our time is up. I want to thank all of our candidates for your commitment, for your care, for your candor, and your good humor. I also want to make sure that we say a very special thank you to Lisa Collins, who is the producer of this program. We appreciate all of your hard work for making it possible. I think I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, the chair.
Please join me in thanking our panel for being here today. And I get the honor of also saying we are adjourned. Thank you.